Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving into the incredibly tangled lives of medieval history's most inbred royal women. These ladies were born from cousin marriages, wedded to their uncles, and occasionally found themselves caught in both situations simultaneously. Trapped in royal traditions that valued keeping everything, both genetically and politically, strictly within the family. Before you get too comfortable, take a quick moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy my content. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to see our global audience tuning in. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soothing background noise, and let's settle in for tonight's historical journey together. Meet Juana of Castile, born in 1479 as the third child of two very important and very closely related parents. Her mother and father were none other than Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the same power couple who bankrolled Columbus' voyages, expelled the Moors, and somehow still thought cousin marriage was a brilliant strategic move. Juana hailed from the Spanish Trastamara dynasty, which already had a strong tradition of keeping marriages in the family. By her generation, the royal bloodline had been stirred just enough to remain technically alive, but not sufficiently to avoid issues like emotional instability, chronic melancholy, and those unfortunate Habsburg chins. In her teenage years, Juana was shipped off to Flanders to marry Philip the Handsome, who, despite the flattering nickname, was less about good looks and more about Habsburg genetic optimization. Naturally, he was her cousin, because of course he was. The Habsburgs were famous for two things: collecting crowns and ignoring all genetic warning signs. Initially, things seemed promising. Juana was intelligent, striking, and reportedly deeply in love with Philip. Unfortunately, Philip's affections were more generously distributed among every woman who wasn't his wife. Juana's passionate nature and jealous tendencies didn't play well at a court accustomed to emotionally cold marriages and half-hearted fidelity. When Philip died suddenly, allegedly from typhoid, possibly from cosmic karma, Juana didn't handle it well. She refused to be separated from his corpse. And I mean refused. She had his coffin accompany her on travels across Spain, occasionally opening it to check on him. Medieval romance? Maybe. Completely unhinged behavior? Also maybe. Her political enemies, and she had plenty, seized on this behavior. Her father Ferdinand used it as evidence of her unfitness to rule. Her son Charles, later Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, followed suit. Conveniently, both men got to govern in her place while she spent most of her life under guard in a convent. Was Juana actually insane? Historians still debate this. Some argue she suffered from mental illness exacerbated by grief and confinement. Others contend she was simply politically inconvenient in a world where emotional women, especially those who noticed their husband's infidelity, were practically committing treason. Either way, Juana wasn't just a tragic figure. She was the perfect storm of royal pressure, dynastic inbreeding, and the world's worst coping mechanisms. If there were an award for most predictable genetic outcome, Maria Anna of Spain would be clutching the trophy while her son drooled on it. Born in 1634, Maria Anna was the daughter of King Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, who were themselves cousins in that special Habsburg way. So naturally, Maria Anna married her uncle. Not a distant cousin or some removed relative, her actual uncle, Ferdinand III, Holy Roman Emperor. Because when your family tree resembles a circle with ambitions, why not double down? Maria Anna was intelligent and devout, fluent in multiple languages, politically astute, and apparently kind-hearted. She brought dignity to the imperial court along with the genetic equivalent of making photocopies of photocopies. Her greatest historical contribution? Giving birth to Charles II of Spain, arguably the most inbred monarch to ever occupy a throne without toppling off. Charles inherited not just the crown but the entire backlog of Habsburg genetic issues: an oversized jaw, weak chin, chronic illnesses, infertility, and suspected cognitive delays. He struggled with basic functions like eating and speaking, which, let's be honest, we can all relate to before coffee, but less acceptable when you're ruling a global empire. Was this Maria Anna's fault? Of course not. She didn't invent Habsburg matchmaking, but she certainly participated in the long-running family tradition of turning political alliances into genetic Russian roulette. To her credit, she deeply loved her son and protected him throughout his fragile life, serving as regent during his minority and trying to shield him from court manipulation, a task akin to stopping a food fight in a room full of armed, starving toddlers. Maria Anna died in 1696, a year after her son. The Spanish Empire she helped birth into decline soon collapsed into the War of Spanish Succession, triggered in part because Charles II couldn't produce an heir. Because, of course, he couldn't. Isabella of Habsburg perfectly illustrates what happens when a royal family treats marriage like a spreadsheet formula. Born in 1501, Isabella was the daughter of Philip the Handsome, yes, him again, and Juana of Castile, aka Juana the Mad. Though at this point, Juana the understandably stressed might be more accurate. This made her the sister of Emperor Charles V and niece to half of Europe. Her DNA wasn't so much a mystery as a royal recipe that had been recycled too many times. A base of Habsburg, a dash of Trastamara, and absolutely no fresh ingredients. At 17, Isabella married Christian II of Denmark, a king famous for attempted reforms, erratic behavior, and generally seeming like he was one bad breakfast away from declaring war on the furniture. Their union was predictably both strategic and awkward. Isabella and Christian were cousins, obviously, but what really sealed their genetic fate was that her Habsburg lineage was already looping like a medieval screensaver. She was expected to bring stability, charm, and political advantage while perhaps distracting from the fact that her family tree was looking more like a wreath. Life in the Danish court wasn't kind to Isabella. Christian's rule went poorly. He was overthrown, imprisoned, and eventually exiled. Isabella followed loyally, which could indicate either true love or hereditary stubbornness. Her health declined during years of court drama and political exile, and she died young at just 24, likely from childbirth complications or illness worsened by stress and royal politics. Their children continued the noble tradition of inbreeding. One daughter, Dorothea, married Frederick II, Elector Palatine, a classic Habsburg match. Because if there's one thing the dynasty valued more than jawlines and titles, it was ensuring no family reunion ever needed name tags. Eleanor of Austria entered the world in 1498, already disadvantaged by being sandwiched between the Renaissance and a mountain of royal expectations. As daughter of Philip the Handsome and Juana of Castile, she was the older sister of Charles V and proud owner of what we might call deluxe Habsburg genetics. Her childhood was essentially a diplomatic waiting room, her teenage years a series of near marriages. At one point she was promised to Henry VIII of England, a bullet dodge that might represent one of the few times Habsburg inbreeding accidentally improved someone's quality of life. Instead, Eleanor's first marriage was to Manuel I of Portugal, not only significantly older, but also her first cousin once removed, which in royal terms was practically marrying the boy next door. She became Queen of Portugal, bore 2 children, and was widowed before 30. The solution? Remarry her off, this time to Francis I of France, who had previously been held prisoner by her brother Charles V. Ah, romance. Francis wasn't particularly fond of Eleanor, viewing her less as a wife and more as a political olive branch with a Habsburg return address. Their childless marriage was chilly. He preferred his mistresses, while Eleanor spent her time reading, praying, and politely pretending not to notice. Despite being Queen of France, she remained loyal to her Habsburg roots. And who could blame her? They might have been inbred, but at least they were predictable. Eleanor outlived both husbands and retired quietly into political obscurity, dying in 1558. Known for her piety and composure, she achieved the Olympic-level Habsburg accomplishment of surviving 2 royal marriages without causing a scandal. Her life was a masterclass in silent endurance. Though she didn't spark wars or scandals, she embodied the Habsburg woman's job description: marry the cousin, produce the heir, and pretend the family resemblance isn't getting stronger each generation. Catherine of Aragon entered the world in 1485 as the daughter of Europe's ultimate power couple, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, Spain's monarchs who united kingdoms, funded Columbus, and apparently never met a cousin marriage they didn't like. As princess of two united kingdoms, Catherine had it all: wealth, education, titles, and a family tree that looped back on itself like a medieval drinking song. By age 3, Catherine was already engaged to Arthur, Prince of Wales, eldest son of Henry VII. Why the rush? Because European royalty treated marriage like a strategic board game where the best moves involved keeping crowns and chromosomes in the family. Catherine and Arthur were second cousins through John of Gaunt, which in noble terms barely counted as related at all. Their 1501 wedding was short-lived. Arthur died just 5 months later. The question of whether their marriage was consummated would later reshape English history, spark the Reformation, and give lawyers centuries of headaches. Meanwhile, teenage Catherine found herself stuck in diplomatic limbo, a widow with no husband, no returned dowry, and still very much a pawn in the royal alliance game. Enter Henry VIII, Arthur's younger brother and eventually Catherine's second husband, because nothing says keeping it in the family like marrying two brothers in succession. Their early years showed genuine affection. Catherine was intelligent, graceful, and politically savvy. She gave Henry prestige, a Spanish alliance, and 5 pregnancies, though only one child, Mary, later Bloody Mary, survived infancy. When Catherine couldn't produce the male heir Henry desperately wanted, things turned apocalyptic. Henry claimed their marriage was invalid because she'd been married to his brother first. Catherine, backed by the Pope, insisted it was legitimate. Thus began history's messiest divorce request, featuring theological debates, political threats, and one determined king inventing his own church just to get out of the marriage. Banished from court and stripped of her title, Catherine spent her final years in isolation, maintaining until her death that she was Henry's rightful queen. Her royal blood may have been famously blue, but it was also suspiciously concentrated. While her marriage shaped English history, it served as a stark reminder that playing musical chairs with family trees rarely ends well. Margaret of Austria arrived in 1480 as the only daughter of Emperor Maximilian I and Mary of Burgundy, meaning she was Habsburg royalty from birth, with a family tree that resembled a circle drawn by an ambitious toddler with a crown. From infancy, Margaret's life was all about strategic packaging. Engaged at 3 to Charles VIII of France, then returned like defective merchandise at 12 when he chose, and of Brittany instead, better real estate. The humiliated but composed Margaret reportedly vowed revenge, and she got it by eventually ruling half of Europe. Her second engagement was to Juan of Castile, son of Ferdinand and Isabella, and yes, her cousin. This match was designed to strengthen Habsburg Spanish ties, while keeping the gene pool comfortably shallow. Juan died shortly after their marriage, leaving Margaret widowed before 20. Offered other suitors, including one of Henry VII's sons, she declined, officially retiring from royal marriage roulette to focus on statecraft, art, and surviving her relatives, no small feat. As governor of the Netherlands under her nephew Charles V, Margaret ruled with intelligence and Habsburg grit, negotiating treaties, balancing volatile provinces, and being one of the few women in Europe actually trusted with power, probably because her last name was Habsburg and she wasn't busy producing inbred heirs. Despite endless dynastic drama, Margaret lived relatively scandal-free, collecting art, patronizing music, and trying to teach young Charles V basic ruling skills, a thankless task considering he was emperor by 19 and related to everyone. Margaret died in 1530 from a foot injury turned fatal because medieval medicine was basically an elaborate way to die from minor injuries. She remains one of the few Habsburg women remembered more for policies than pedigree, though that pedigree was still impressively inbred. Blanche of Castile was born in 1188 when nobles still considered cousin marriage a power move rather than a genetic risk. As granddaughter of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England, and daughter of King Alfonso VIII of Castile and Eleanor of England, Blanche entered the world with more royal blood than actual hemoglobin. By the time she could walk, her family was already planning which relative she'd marry. The winner? Louis VIII of France, her cousin, not distant. But we share grandparents. Should we really do this? Close. At 12, Blanche sailed to France for her marriage in 1200, becoming queen consort and later regent for her son Louis IX, St. Louis. Far from being a figurehead, Blanche ruled France with iron determination, organizing crusades, crushing rebellions, and navigating barons who doubted her both as a woman and as too Castilian. Her response? Diplomacy, force, and occasional house arrests. Genetically, Blanche represented centuries of royal consolidation. English, Castilian, and French ancestry all blended into one formidable queen. If DNA had warning lights, hers would have been blinking constantly. She was pious, fiercely protective of her children, and absolutely not to be underestimated. While Louis IX became a saint, Blanche was the one who kept him alive long enough to earn the title. And of Bohemia and Hungary, born 1503, was Habsburg royalty with half a crown and half a family reunion in her veins. Her parents were Vladislaus II of Hungary/Bohemia and de Foix, making her yet another carefully arranged tangle of royal relations. By 18, she married her double first cousin, yes, sharing both sets of grandparents, Ferdinand of Austria, future Holy Roman Emperor. In modern terms, this would raise eyebrows. In Habsburg terms, it raised dynastic stability and possibly birth defect rates. Their politically golden marriage produced 15 children, because when consolidating bloodlines, go big or go home. And was pious, kind, and dutiful, the human glue in Europe's political jigsaw puzzle. She accompanied Ferdinand on imperial campaigns and held courts across Europe until her death in 1547, likely exhausted from constant childbirth, statecraft, and pretending her family wasn't aggressively in love with itself. Through her, the Habsburgs gobbled up Central Europe like it was on clearance. Joanna of Naples, 1326 to 1382, ruled during an era when cousin marriage wasn't just fashionable, but practically a noble survival strategy. Her family tree was a Mediterranean spaghetti bowl of French Valois and Angevin branches. Her first husband was Andrew of Hungary, her cousin, naturally, an unpopular match arranged by the Pope. When Andrew was mysteriously murdered, possibly with Joanna's awareness, she went on to marry 3 more times, twice to cousins, once scandalously to a non-relative. A political powerhouse, Joanna ruled Naples independently, stood up to the papacy, and supported reforms. She was even excommunicated for backing the wrong pope during the Western Schism. Ultimately overthrown by yet another relative, Charles of Durazzo, she was imprisoned and smothered with a pillow, a fittingly dramatic end for a woman who married her way through multiple family branches. Isabella Clara Eugenia, 1566 to 1633, daughter of Philip II of Spain and Elizabeth of Valois, more cousin marriage, was groomed from childhood to rule. Married to her cousin Archduke Albert of Austria, they became co-sovereigns of the Spanish Netherlands, meaning they governed a political powder keg while reporting to Madrid. Their reportedly happy marriage, possibly because shared DNA enabled telepathy, ended when Albert died in 1621, after which Isabella ruled solo as governor, took religious vows, and dressed as a nun, without slowing her political work. Competent and deeply religious, Isabella oversaw treaties, maintained order, and even kept the postal service running, proving Habsburg inbreeding could occasionally produce actual competence rather than just weak chins and erratic rulers. Her reign showed that behind the genetic mess, there could be real administrative skill. Mary of Burgundy, 1457 to 1482, inherited Europe's richest and most unstable duchy at 19 after her father Charles the Bold died in battle. To secure her position, she married Maximilian of Austria, her second cousin once removed, practically strangers by Habsburg standards. Their politically brilliant marriage was also reportedly affectionate, scandalous by arranged marriage standards. Mary pushed back against French ambitions and rebellious cities, signing the Great Privilege to grant more rights to subjects. Her life ended abruptly at 25 during a hunting accident, because aristocrats loved flirting with fatal injuries for sport. Her death transformed Burgundy from independent powerhouse to Habsburg territory through her son Philip the Handsome, father of Europe's most inbred monarchs. Maria Theresa of Austria, 1717 to 1780, only surviving child of Emperor Charles VI, inherited the Habsburg domains despite Europe's skepticism about female rulers. She married Francis Stephen of Lorraine, a distant cousin, because tradition, producing 16 children including Marie Antoinette. A reformist powerhouse, Maria Theresa modernized the military, taxation, and education, often while pregnant. Her legacy was securing Habsburg power through both policy and prolific breeding, arranging her children's marriages to strengthen alliances, and continue the family tradition of turning political matches into genetic experiments. She proved that in the Habsburg world, multitasking meant overhauling bureaucracies between pregnancies. Yolande of Aragon, 1384 to 1442, was nobility incarnate, the daughter of King John I of Aragon and Violani de Bar, meaning she carried more royal surnames than most people had teeth. Her family tree wasn't so much a tree as an intricate root system where half your relatives doubled as potential in-laws. Intelligent and politically savvy by medieval standards, which made her dangerously opinionated, Yolande was both a valuable dynastic prize and a nightmare for anyone expecting a docile queen. Her marriage to Louis II of Anjou, her cousin, naturally blended French and Aragonese ambitions. As Duchess of Anjou and nominal Queen of Naples, Yolande wasn't content with embroidery. She became the behind-the-scenes architect of alliances, financing armies and possibly being the only royal to support Joan of Arc without suffering political consequences. While her husband chased unstable thrones, Yolande ran the show, raising armies, negotiating treaties, and managing estates like a medieval CEO. Her children married strategically, more cousins, obviously, with her son René becoming the good, likely because he inherited her brains without all the chromosomes. Daughter Marie married Charles VII of France, giving Yolande influence over the French throne in Joan of Arc's campaigns without ever lifting a sword herself. In an era of weak kings and ambitious generals, Yolande was the power correcting maps and rolling her eyes. Inbred, yes, but also incisive and influential enough to outplay kings. Margaret of York, 1446 to 1503, entered the world as sister to Edward IV and Richard III, aka half the War of the Roses. Her DNA was coded for intrigue and close proximity courtship, so naturally she married Charles the Bold of Burgundy, another cousin, in 1468. Less about romance, more about giving France indigestion. Their political match somehow became respectful and functional, with Margaret thriving in Burgundy's pre-Renaissance Instagram-worthy court of silks, tapestries, and dangerously obsessive embroidery. Nicknamed the Great Lady of the Netherlands, Margaret hosted dignitaries, managed finances, and handled correspondence when Charles was off starting unwinnable wars. After his predictably battlefield death, she didn't retire, but became regent for stepdaughter Mary of Burgundy and advisor to stepson-in-law Maximilian of Austria, launching the Habsburg dynasty proper. Childless herself, Margaret helped raise Philip the Handsome, father of Charles V, meaning her fingerprints are all over Europe's most self-important chin-heavy dynasty. Catherine de' Medici, 1519 to 1589, brought Florentine ambition to France through marriage to Henry II, alongside his very public mistress Diane de Poitiers. Awkward. After Henry's jousting death, because nothing screams fragile masculinity like taking a splinter to the eye for sport, Catherine became queen mother to 3 sons who took turns wearing the crown while she actually ruled. Deeply Catholic but politically flexible, she alternated between funding Protestant weddings and orchestrating their massacre, St. Bartholomew's Day. Oops. Blamed for wars, court decadence, and suspicious dinner poisonings, Catherine was also a patron of the arts who kept the Valois dynasty stumbling forward. Her legacy? A generation of royals who looked suspiciously similar and ruled with Catholic guilt and aggressive cousin hugging. In ancient Greek dream temples, sleep wasn't rest, it was sacred theater. The Asclepia, healing sanctuaries dedicated to Asclepius, weren't rustic shrines, but sprawling spiritual complexes where the sick came not for pills, but transformation. Preparation began days before. Fasting, sacred baths, animal sacrifices, abstaining from sex and certain thoughts. The goal? Purify body and spirit before incubation. Intentional sleep where divine visions might heal. Inside the abaton, dark enclosed chamber, supplicants lay on stone slabs or animal skins as priests burned incense and whispered prayers. Dreams here weren't random, but divine messages. Snakes slithering over bodies, a good sign, as they symbolized rejuvenation or direct medical advice. Morning brought dream analysis by priest-physicians prescribing herbal remedies or interpreting symbolic cures. For Greeks, sleep was mystical travel, and with the right rituals, that midnight whisper might change your fate. Ancient Egyptians saw sleep as little death, when the soul, wandered spiritual realms. Nightly rituals involved frankincense and myrrh, not just aromas but sacred demon repellers, chants invoking Thoth, wisdom god, or Bes, lion-faced nightmare warden. Bedrooms became sacred spaces, beds aligned with constellations, headrests keeping souls star-aligned. Troubling dreams might send you to Serapis or Imhotep temples for Greek-style incubation, always seeking harmony between body, soul, and cosmos. Babylonians treated dreams as battlegrounds of omens. Professional Sha'alu dream interpreters analyzed visions using clay tablet dictionaries. Lion equals victory, drowning equals betrayal. Protective rituals included amulets, bed tablets, and juniper incense to purify spaces. Night prayers encouraged prophetic dreams, while temple incubation sought divine guidance on wars, crops, or marriages. To Babylonians, dreams weren't psychology but divine code, and every night was a chance to decrypt the god's intentions. Vedic India considered sleep a sacred return to universal spirit, Brahman. Preparations involved pranayama, breath control to align with cosmic pulses, not just to sleep, but to journey safely. The Gayatri mantra was whispered facing sunset, while sleeping directions avoided north, death's realm. Ayurvedic oils and herbs, ashwagandha, tulsi, promoted lucid dreams, seen as reflections of inner truth. Disturbing dreams signaled soul imbalance, sometimes requiring consultation with rishi spiritual teachers, because in Vedic tradition, sleep wasn't escape but sacred reunion. Taoist sleep rituals in ancient China focused on qi energy flow. Before bed, qigong movements with deep breathing calmed the shun, spirit housed in the heart. Bedrooms were minimalist for good qi, wooden beds, firm headrests, sparse decor. Sleeping on the right side aided digestion and dream clarity. Dreams were journeys of the Han, ethereal soul, with talismans under pillows protecting against lost souls. Taoists didn't just sleep, they practiced internal alchemy, using night to nurture immortality through energy balance. Indigenous American tribes from Lakota to Hopi viewed dreams as portals to spirit worlds. Purification began in sweat lodges, steam cleansing body and spirit before seeking visions. For youth coming of age, vision quests involved fasting and sleeping isolated in nature for days, hoping for dreams dictating their roles, warrior, healer. Dream catchers, originating with Ojibwe, filtered bad dreams, while elders interpreted symbols. Bear equals strength, hawk equals clarity. Unlike Western individualism, these dreams were communal, discussed around fires, woven into myths, guiding tribal decisions. Mesopotamians believed dreams were ruled by Nanche, goddess of justice and prophecy. Her temples offered dream incubation during festivals when spiritual veils thinned. Preparations included Euphrates River baths and incantations to Nanshe or Aya, wisdom god. Homes had clay tablet charms against Lamastu, Demonis harming children, while Pazuzu amulets warded off nightmares. Discovered dream dictionaries cataloged symbols, 3,000 plus years before Freud, proving Mesopotamians saw dreams as divine messaging systems requiring ritual decryption. Celtic druids considered sleep a bridge to the other world. Pre-bed rituals used mugwort and yarrow, still dream herbs today, burned or under pillows to thin spiritual veils. Sacred sites like stone circles or Samhain festivals amplified dream potency. Warriors sought battle prophecies through fasting and forest sleep. Celtic poets interpreted dream symbols in verse. White stag equals transformation, weaving them into mythology. For Celts, night pulsed with ancestral whispers, if you dared listen. Japanese Onmyoto blended Taoist, Buddhist, and Shinto sleep magic. In forces ruled night, requiring protection from yokai spirits. Ofuda, paper talismans on walls warded off demons, while sandalwood incense pleased guardians. Sleeping directions avoided north, death, and children got hitogata dolls to absorb bad energy. Dreams of fire or blood meant illness. Waterfalls or lotuses signaled blessings. For ancient Japanese, sleep was ritual warfare, fought nightly with charms, chants, and strategic positioning against unseen enemies. Heracleon, known to ancient Egyptians as Thonis, wasn't just another coastal city. Before Alexandria claimed Mediterranean glory, this was Egypt's premier international port, where Greek merchants, Egyptian priests, and foreign envoys mingled in a vibrant cultural melting pot. Yet by the late medieval period, Heracleon had vanished so completely that many scholars dismissed it as legend, an Egyptian Atlantis. But legends sometimes turn out to be true. At its zenith, Heracleon sprawled across the Nile Delta with grand canals winding past towering temples and bustling markets. Colossal statues of Amunias and Horus washed over harbors where ships from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond docked to pay duties. This was Egypt's customs checkpoint. No vessel could proceed upriver without stopping here first. Pharaohs performed sacred coronation rites in its temples, seeking divine legitimacy before their reigns began. So how does such an important city disappear? Between the 2nd and 8th century CE, nature delivered multiple blows. Earthquakes liquefied the soft delta soil beneath its foundations, rising seas swallowed its edges, and Nile silt buried what remained. Piece by piece, Heracleon sank into the Mediterranean until even its location was forgotten, remembered only in fragments by Herodotus and a few Greek texts. For over a millennium, Heracleon slept beneath Abuker-based silt-choked waters until the year 2000, when French archaeologist Frank Godio's team made an electrifying discovery. Using advanced sonar, they identified anomalies 30 feet underwater. What emerged wasn't just scattered artifacts, but an entire city frozen in time. Toppled 16-foot-tall statues lying where they'd fallen, temple debris preserved in anaerobic mud, even intact steel bearing bilingual inscriptions that finally confirmed this was indeed Thonis Heracleon. The scale of preservation stunned archaeologists. Unlike land sites ravaged by looters and erosion, these underwater ruins offered pristine snapshots of daily life. Gold coins rested where merchants dropped them, ceremonial barges still carried divine effigies, and temple inventories recorded taxes paid in silver and incense. Most remarkably, the famous Decree of Nectanebo I Steel, carved in 380 BC, survived completely legible, its hieroglyphs and Greek text proving the city's dual identity as Thonis, Egyptian, and Heracleon, Greek. Heracleon wasn't just a trade hub, but a spiritual capital. The Temple of Amunias served as both religious complex and political stage where pharaohs received divine sanction. Excavations revealed ceremonial boats used in watery processions, suggesting Osiris worship rituals mirrored the city's own fate, submerged like the drowned god before rebirth. Statues of queens and pharaohs stood alongside Greek votive offerings, showing how foreign merchants honored local gods. The city's cosmopolitan nature shines through recovered artifacts, Egyptian scarabs beside Greek amphorae, Phoenician glass alongside Libyan jewelry. This was where cultures collided and merged. Egyptian officials wrote in Greek, Greek merchants adopted local customs, and hybrid deities like Ammonius Jerub emerged. Heracleon's very layout reflected this fusion, with Egyptian-style temples built using Greek architectural techniques. Yet Heracleon's glory was always precarious. Built on unstable delta silt, its foundations were literally dissolving. As earthquakes struck and sea levels rose, buildings tilted then vanished beneath the waves. The harbor became unnavigable, forcing trade to shift westward to Alexandria. By the time Arab conquerors arrived in the 8th century, Heracleon existed only as rumors beneath fishermen's nets. Gaudio's ongoing excavations have mapped only about 5% of the city, but already it's rewriting history. The discovery of over 70 ancient shipwrecks, some still loaded with cargo, reveals bustling maritime activity. One wreck contained perfectly preserved Greek pottery stacked as if packed yesterday. Another held gold coins from Ptolemy II's reign. These finds confirm Heracleon's role as mandatory customs checkpoint. No ship could bypass its tax collectors. Perhaps most poignant are the personal items: a priest's golden ritual vessel, a merchant's bronze scale, a child's carved toy. These silent witnesses humanize the grand narrative, reminding us that before disaster struck, Heracleon thrived with ordinary lives. Market haggling, temple ceremonies, children playing by the canals. Their world didn't so much end as gradually slip beneath the waves, until even memory faded. Modern technology continues revealing Heracleon's secrets. 3D photogrammetry recreates collapsed structures in their original positions, while sediment analysis tracks the disaster timeline. Researchers now believe multiple earthquakes in 365 CE and later triggered soil liquefaction, causing entire districts to sink catastrophically within hours. The Nile's shifting branches then buried the ruins under 10 feet of silt, nature's perfect preservative. Heracleon's legacy endures not just in museums, but in our understanding of ancient globalization. This was where Greece truly first encountered Egypt, where Mediterranean trade routes converged, and where cultures blended centuries before Alexander. Its rediscovery proves that sometimes the most important cities don't vanish. They simply wait beneath the waves for us to listen to their stories. The Habsburg women weren't just political pawns. They were walking medical case studies in the consequences of dynastic inbreeding. While their male relatives collected crowns and fought wars, these women bore the physical brunt of generations of calculated cousin marriages. Their bodies became living ledgers where the debts of royal bloodlines came due in miscarriages, deformities, and chronic illnesses that would make modern doctors wince. Take Joanna of Castile's daughter Isabella of Austria, 1501 to 1526. Born to parents who were both grandchildren of the same royal couple, making them double first cousins, Isabella inherited not just the Habsburg jaw, but a catalog of reproductive issues. Married at 17 to Christian II of Denmark, another cousin, naturally, she endured 5 pregnancies in 7 years, 2 stillbirths, 2 infant deaths, and 1 surviving daughter who'd continue the family tradition of problematic unions. Contemporary accounts describe Isabella suffering melancholic humors and female obstructions, likely severe postpartum depression compounded by gynecological complications from back-to-back pregnancies. When she died at 24 after yet another traumatic birth, her autopsy reportedly revealed the womb in such state as frightened the surgeons, a grim testament to what royal baby-making machinery actually looked like after generations of genetic shortcuts. Then there's Maria Anna of Neuburg, 1667 to 1740, the last wife of Spain's grotesquely inbred Charles II. Tasked with producing an heir for a husband whose genome read like a cautionary tale, Maria Anna endured 8 years of humiliating fertility treatments, from drinking ground ram's testicles to enduring vaginal douches with stimulating waters. When conception proved impossible, Charles being functionally sterile, she was blamed anyway, forced to undergo public examinations by teams of physicians who declared her barren despite the emperor's obvious physical and cognitive deficiencies. Her letters reveal a woman trapped between pity for her husband, the poor man knows not what his body does, and resentment at being scapegoated for dynastic collapse. The Tudor women fared no better. Catherine of Aragon's 6 pregnancies yielded only one surviving child, Mary I, with historians now suspecting repeated miscarriages resulted from Rh incompatibility, a condition exacerbated by marrying within familial bloodlines. Her successor and Boleyn's phantom pregnancies and deformed stillborn son, described as a shapeless mass of flesh, may point to syphilis contracted from Henry VIII, whose own reproductive failures trace back to his parents' consanguineous marriage. By Elizabeth I's reign, the Tudor fertility crisis became political theater, with ambassadors speculating in coded letters about the curse upon their wombs, never acknowledging generations of strategic intermarriage had created a biological dead end. Even seemingly healthy queens paid the price. Frances Marie Antoinette, 1755 to 1793, though not from an inbred line herself, suffered the consequences of marrying into one. After 7 years of unconsummated marriage due to Louis XVI phimosis, a condition possibly linked to bourbon inbreeding, she endured multiple forced medical examinations before the king finally underwent surgery. Her subsequent pregnancies were plagued by complications, violent vomiting, fainting spells, and a terrifying hemorrhage after delivering Marie Therese that left her as pale as her sheets for 40 days. The same courtiers who mocked her for initial childlessness later criticized her for excessive breeding, highlighting the impossible standards royal women faced. The most heartbreaking cases were the child brides, like Margaret of Austria, 1480 to 1530. Married at 13 to Juan of Castile, her 18-year-old cousin, she was widowed by 16 after one died of fever, likely tuberculosis exacerbated by genetic weaknesses. Her second marriage at 24 to Philibert of Savoy, another cousin, ended when he died 3 years later from pleurisy after drinking iced water post-hot. Though a brilliant stateswoman who ruled the Netherlands, Margaret's tomb sculpture depicts her between these 2 husbands, her marble hands forever resting on their armored effigies, a silent commentary on how royal women's identities remain tied to reproductive tragedy. Spanish chroniclers kept meticulous records of Queen Maria Luisa of Savoy's 1688 to 1714 sufferings. Married to the similarly inbred Philip V, she endured 10 live births in 13 years, with physicians noting her convulsions during confinement and teeth lost from calcium depletion. After her 7th child, the queen developed a uterine prolapse, so severe she had to be carried everywhere in a chair, yet still produced 3 more heirs before dying at 25 from tuberculosis, her body literally consumed by dynastic demands. Perhaps no one symbolizes this biological toll more than Anna of Russia, 1693 to 1740. The last of the Romanovs inbred pre-Peter the Great line, she suffered 12 pregnancies with only one surviving child, a son who died at 20 from what modern geneticists suspect was porphyria. Her autopsy revealed a body ravaged by the strain, an enlarged heart from chronic anxiety, ovarian cysts from hormonal imbalance, and a spine deformed by repeated difficult births. Yet contemporary portraits show her regal and composed, the perfect image of imperial power, the ultimate irony for women whose value was measured in viable heirs, not quality of life. These women's medical ordeals exposed the dirty secret of royal bloodlines. What monarchs called divine right often looked like uterine prolapses and neonatal mortality in practice. Their suffering wasn't incidental but inevitable, the direct cost of treating human biology as a political bargaining chip. While history remembers kings for their battles and treaties, these royal women fought their own wars against infected birth canals, malformed fetuses, and the cruel arithmetic that valued womb over woman. The Bourbon courts of 18th century Europe turned royal pregnancies into grotesque public spectacles. When Frances Marie Leschinska (1703–1768) went into labor, the entire court crammed into her bedchamber, nobles jostling for views as doctors prodded her exposed body, while foreign ambassadors filed clinical reports on her dilation. She delivered 10 children this way, each birth leaving her weaker. By the last, witnesses noted she bled like a slaughtered doe. Yet Versailles etiquette demanded she receive visitors hours postpartum, propped up on blood-stained silks with a painted face masking her pallor. Spain's Maria Luisa of Parma, 1751–1819, faced even crueler expectations. Married to her first cousin Charles IV, she endured 24 pregnancies in 29 years, a relentless cycle that destroyed her teeth, caused chronic pelvic inflammation, and left her temporarily paralyzed after one stillbirth. Court painters were instructed to depict her as eternally youthful, resulting in portraits where her swollen abdomen from perpetual pregnancy was airbrushed into empire-waisted gowns, her gaunt face plumped with rosy glaze. Private letters reveal she begged physicians for just 1 year's rest from the marriage bed, only to be told royal wombs had no vacation days. The physical toll extended beyond childbirth. Many Habsburg women developed Habsburg lip, a grotesquely elongated lower jaw making chewing difficult, alongside epilepsy and porphyria-induced madness. Joanna of Castile's granddaughter Maria of Austria, 1528–1603, chewed food sideways due to jaw deformity, while her sister Joanna of Habsburg, 1547–1578, needed wet nurses until age 12 because misaligned teeth prevented solid food consumption. Their brother Philip II's solution? Ordering gold-plated spoons to assist the royal ladies at table, rather than questioning generations of incestuous matches. Reproductive coercion took subtler forms too. At Russian courts, empresses were subjected to monthly fertility inspections where physicians measured their cervical mucus, a practice Catherine the Great later banned as fit for cattle, not crowned heads. Lesser known is how Saxon princesses like Maria Amalia, 1724–1760, were force-fed fertility tonics containing lead and mercury, resulting in neurological damage that left her hands trembling too violently to hold her newborns. Even in death, their bodies weren't their own. When Sweden's Ulrika Eleonora, 1688–1741, died from smallpox after 12 miscarriages, her autopsy became a public event. Surgeons displayed her dissected reproductive organs like museum pieces, declaring her uterus shrunken to the size of a walnut from repeated trauma. Similarly, when Savoy's Maria Giovanna, 1644–1724, succumbed to breast cancer, doctors pickled her tumors in formaldehyde as curiosities of royal pathology. A far cry from the jeweled reliquaries given to male monarchs' hearts. These women's medical records read like battlefield reports: uterine prolapses, septic infections, shattered pelvises. Yet their suffering was systematically erased from official histories, reduced to footnotes like died in childbed or taken by female troubles. The same chronicles that detailed kings' gouty toes and hunting accidents treated royal women's broken bodies as inevitable collateral, the hidden cost of doing dynastic business. Marie Antoinette's day began not with the gentle rustle of silk or the soft murmurs of her ladies, but with the cold, clinical scrutiny of the court. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doors to her bedchamber would swing open, and in marched the Duchesses of France, their powdered wigs towering like monuments to their own self-importance. At their lead stood the Comtesse de Noailles, her bony fingers clutching a silver-handled magnifying glass, not to admire the Queen's beauty, but to inspect her bedsheets for the faintest trace of blood. La verification, they called it, the verification. A ritual masquerading as tradition, where the Queen's fertility was assessed like livestock at market. If the sheets bore the desired stain, a satisfied nod would pass among the women, and the news would ripple through Versailles before breakfast: Her Majesty is still capable of bearing an heir. But when the sheets remained spotless, when another month passed without the promise of pregnancy, the whispers began. Perhaps God punishes her for her Austrian blood. Perhaps she dances too much. Perhaps the king's seed finds no welcome in her womb. And then came the miscarriages. The first, in the spring of 1779, left her bed drenched in crimson, her body racked with contractions that brought no living child. The court physicians bled her with leeches to balance the humors, while priests muttered about divine retribution for her love of masked balls. By the third loss, even her closest confidants eyed her with pity, or worse, suspicion. A queen who cannot bear sons is no queen at all. In Madrid, Maria Luisa of Parma kept two sets of diaries. The first, bound in gilt leather and left conspicuously on her escritoire, recorded the official version of her life, attended mass, received ambassadors, smiled. The second, hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her dressing room, told the truth in jagged, ink-blotted script. December 1786, the king visits my bedchamber again. I bite my lip until it bleeds. The child will come in summer, God willing or unwilling, as it may be. June 1787, the midwives say I must not scream. A queen must suffer in silence. They have taken the baby, another girl, to the wet nurse. My legs will not stop shaking. October 1792, the bleeding has not ceased. Dr. Velasco says my womb is fatigued. He does not say it is dying. I count the tiles on the ceiling 47, to keep from counting the graves 5. By her 40th birthday, Maria Luisa's teeth had loosened from calcium starvation, her hair thinning to wispy strands. Yet every Sunday, she donned the garden fit, a hoop skirt wide enough to hide her atrophied legs, and allowed the court painter to immortalize her as eternally youthful, forever ripe with potential. The portrait that hangs in the Prado today shows none of the abscesses that rotted her jaw, none of the tremors that made her hands spasm like wounded birds. Vienna's Hofburg Palace housed a particularly grotesque tradition. Every full moon, the archduchesses of marriageable age were summoned to the imperial solar, not for lessons in diplomacy or dance, but for the Jungfräulichkeitsprüfung, the virginity examination. Maria Theresa's daughters lined up like lambs for slaughter, their stays unlaced by stone-faced matrons. The eldest, Maria Anna, clenched her fists as the midwife's cold fingers probed between her thighs. You must be unspoiled for your cousin in Naples, the woman reminded her, though they both knew the Neapolitan king's famously malformed body could never consummate the marriage. When the examination ended, the girls were made to kneel on rice grains until they recited their flawlessness to the court genealogist. The youngest, Maria Antonia, once fainted from the pain. She was revived with vinegar salts and forced to repeat the ordeal. The Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg holds a chapel few tourists notice. Behind a velvet rope lie 12 miniature coffins, each no longer than a loaf of bread, each lined with satin and studded with the Romanov diamonds. Anna Ioannovna commissioned them herself after her 12th stillbirth. My little angels, she called them, though the court physicians wrote monstrosities in their ledgers. The smallest coffin contains twins, their fused skeletons preserved in formaldehyde. The nanny's diary entry for that terrible night in 1733 survives. Her Imperial Majesty delivered 2 sons joined at the breast. They lived long enough to cry a single note, like kittens, not children, before the priest baptized them demons and they ceased breathing. Anna ordered the twins buried with their tiny hands folded in prayer, their faces masked by wax effigies of perfect cherubs. No one spoke of the truth. No one dared. When King Philip IV of Spain died, his widow Mariana was given 2 choices: retire to a convent or remain at court as a walking tomb. She chose the convent, only to find her prison gilded with piety. The nuns of Las Descalzas Reals measured her portions like jailers. 3 ounces of fish on Fridays, a thimble of wine at communion. When Mariana attempted to refuse even these scraps, the abbess wrote to the regent, Her Majesty wastes away in deliberate sin. Guards were posted at mealtimes to ensure she swallowed every bite. In her final years, Mariana took to hiding bread crusts in her sleeves, not to eat, but to feed the convent mice. They at least, she told her lapdog, may choose their own hunger. Isabella of Parma's last sitting for the court painter lasted 7 hours. She perched on a stool, her belly swollen with what would be her final pregnancy, while the artist carefully airbrushed the jaundice from her skin, the bruises under her eyes. The finished canvas showed a radiant princess clutching a healthy son. The truth? The child was born blue and gasping, dead before the wet nurse could be summoned. Isabella followed 3 weeks later, her autopsy revealing a liver blackened as if by fire from the so-called fertility tonics forced upon her. When her husband commissioned a memorial statue, he instructed the sculptor, make her beautiful again. The nursery at Versailles smelled of rosewater and despair. In 1684, Louis XIV's daughter-in-law, the Dauphin Maria Anna Victoria of Bavaria, knelt on the cold marble floor, pressing her ear against her newborn son's chest. The wet nurse had just screamed, a sound that brought the entire court running. Now the gathered nobles watched as the mother peeled back the lace swaddling to reveal the infant's twisted legs fused like a mermaid's tail, his heart beating faintly beneath paper-thin skin. "Un monstre," whispered the Archbishop of Paris, making the sign of the cross. The king's physician was more clinical, a classic case of cyanomelia, common when royal cousins marry. He said this while standing beneath a portrait of Louis XIV's own parents, first cousins who had produced 3 stillborns before the Sun King's miraculous survival. Maria Anna was given 2 choices: smother the child quietly or let him starve. She chose a third path. For 3 days and nights, she cradled the malformed baby in the secret chapel of Saint Medit, dripping sacramental wine between his lips until his tiny lungs stilled. When the tiny coffin was sealed, the court chronicler wrote only, "The Dauphin's second son expired of a fever. God's will be done." In the winter of 1732, the Portuguese court awoke to screams echoing from Queen Maria Anna's apartments. The 49-year-old queen was hemorrhaging after delivering her 7th stillborn. This one so deformed the midwife fainted at the sight. What happened next became known as O Segredo de Sang, the blood secret. As physicians frantically packed the queen's womb with linen strips soaked in brandy, a maid discovered the true horror. The afterbirth contained not one, but 2 partially formed fetuses fused at the spine. The royal anatomist's sketch, later found hidden in the Vatican archives, shows the twins sharing a single malformed heart, their conjoined skulls resembling a grotesque 8-petaled rose. King John V ordered the evidence burned, but not before the Spanish ambassador bribed a servant for details. His coded dispatch to Madrid survives. The queen's womb has become a cemetery. They say when she wept, tears of blood streaked her cheeks, though this may be the candlelight through her ruby eardrops. Empress Maria Theresa's private cabinet held a collection that would haunt any modern museum. 37 lifelike wax dolls, each representing a child born to Habsburg brides between 1700 to 1750. The curator was instructed to arrange them in 2 groups. To the left stood the blessed, perfect dolls with rosy cheeks, their tiny hands folded in prayer. These represented the few healthy heirs. To right crouched the cursed dolls with elongated jaws, cleft palates, and in one horrific case, a double set of arms growing like branches from a twisted torso. Each deformity was modeled from real stillbirths, their wax faces frozen in silent screams. When the empress' youngest daughter, Maria Antonia, was betrothed to Louis XVI, she was forced to study these figures daily. "This," Maria Theresa said, tapping the glass case containing a doll with no eyes, "is why we marry within the family. Better a blind Habsburg than a bastard Valois." The Palace of Caserta kept a special set of silk ropes in the Queen's dowager apartments, not for drapery, but as a morbid courtesy. When Caroline of Brunswick, 1768 to 1821, was exiled for failing to produce a non-deformed heir, she found the ropes neatly coiled in her dressing room, along with an ensigned note, "For Her Majesty's convenience." It was an open secret that 3 previous queen dowagers had hanged themselves with identical ropes when their wombs failed. Caroline chose a different exit. She drank a vial of mercury smuggled in her pomade jar. The autopsy noted her tongue had turned black before death, her final words being, "Tell my daughter." Before the poison seized her throat, Marie Antoinette's final sitting for Elizabeth VG Lebrun occurred in 1792, though no official record exists. The artist's private memoirs describe the scene. The queen sat stiffly in Temple Prison, her once famous hair now patchy from stress-induced alopecia. When VG Lebrun lifted a brush to disguise the bald spots with paint, Marie grabbed her wrist. "No lies today," she whispered. The resulting sketch, hidden inside the artist's corset for years, shows a gaunt woman with hollow eyes, her scalp visible through wispy strands. Unlike the famous 1788 portrait where pearls gleamed in her hair, this drawing shows lice crawling near her temples. At the bottom, the queen had scrawled in charcoal, "Remember me thus." In the winter of 1678, the French court witnessed a delivery that would become legend. Louis XIV Mistress Madame de Montespan screamed for 3 days straight as physicians sawed apart the bones of her pelvis with an instrument resembling a cheese grater. The king's newest bastard, a girl with the Habsburg jaw and a clubfoot, had become lodged sideways in the birth canal. When the child finally emerged, the royal surgeon noted with clinical detachment the left leg remained inside the mother. Montespan survived, but her screams haunted Versailles Hall of Mirrors for months. Servants refused to enter her chambers, claiming the scent of rotting flesh clung to the tapestries. The king, ever pragmatic, simply moved his affections to a new mistress, one with wider hips, better suited to breeding. The Spanish court maintained a macabre tradition. Every royal birth triggered a competition among peasant women to become ama de leche real. The prize? Having their own newborn drowned in the Manzanares River so their milk wouldn't be contaminated by another child suckling. In 1621, a young milkmaid named Inés de Torres won this grim honor, only to discover Queen Isabel's baby was a blue child, likely from Porphyria. For 6 months, Inés nursed the whimpering prince in a velvet-lined bassinet, watching his skin turn ever darker. When he finally died, the court paid her handsomely, then had her tongue cut out to prevent gossip. Beneath Prague Castle's chapel, a secret altar still bears scorch marks from the 16th century. Here, and of Bohemia, 1528 to 1590, participated in midnight rituals where court alchemists mixed her menstrual blood with powdered unicorn horn, actually narwhal tusk, and the ashes of stillborn twins. Her diary, discovered hidden in a castle wall in 1932, describes the horror. They made me drink it from a chalice shaped like a womb. The taste of iron and salt. The alchemist swore I'd conceive within the month. Instead, I vomited black bile for a fortnight. When she finally bore a living child, the infant's teeth were already present at birth, a condition called natal teeth, and it chewed through her nipples within days. The court physician's solution? Swaddling the prince's mouth shut between feedings. In Vienna's Hofburg Palace, a special room displays 32 miniature coffins arranged like a macabre dollhouse. Each contains the mummified remains of Habsburg stillborns, their tiny limbs arranged in grotesque tableaus. A 1689 fetus with its intestines outside the body, preserved in honey. Twin girls from 1701 sharing a single malformed heart in a glass reliquary. The infamous Harry Prince of 1723, his entire body covered in thick fur. Maria Theresa would bring visiting brides here, stroking the tiny caskets while whispering, "This is the price of our bloodline's purity." On her deathbed in 1644, Anne of Austria summoned a priest, not for absolution, but to dictate a letter to her surviving son, Louis XIV. "My darling, when you were in my womb, I drank a pint of blood daily from executed criminals. The doctors swore it would make you strong. Instead, it gave me visions of hell and turned your baby teeth black. Forgive me. I only wanted you to live." The Sun King had the letter burned, but not before making a copy now locked in the Vatican's most secret archives. The stones of Europe's palaces still whisper. Press your ear to the gilded walls of Versailles, and you might hear the echo of a queen's stifled scream. Run your fingers along the banisters of Madrid's Alcazar, and you'll feel the grooves where desperate nails clawed at the wood. The past is not dead. It lingers in the marrow of history, in the DNA of living descendants, in the unmarked graves of infants who never drew breath. For centuries, these women were reduced to footnotes, died in childbed, failed to produce an heir, succumbed to female troubles. But their stories are not tragedies, they are rebellions. Every time Maria Luisa of Parma hid her diary beneath the floorboards, every time Marie Antoinette demanded her bald scalp be painted truthfully, every time a nameless wet nurse spat the king's poisoned milk into a chamber pot, they were fighting. The world has moved on. The Habsburg John no longer haunts royal portraits, and princesses are no longer inspected like livestock. But when a modern woman traces her fingers over the cool glass of a museum display, past the infant's lace bonnet, the rusted bone saw, the portrait where a queen's smile doesn't reach her eyes, she is touching a chain of silent defiance. These ghosts do not ask for pity. They ask to be remembered, not as victims, but as women who endured the unendurable and still found ways to etch their truth into history's skin.